power, corruption, betrayal. These are the marks of the most wicked kings in the Bible. But what happens when a leader turns against God himself? What happens when a ruler is meant to guide a nation, instead leads it into destruction, idolatry, and bloodshed? Throughout history, kings have risen and fallen, but some are left behind a legacy so dark that their names are forever etched in the pages of Scripture as warnings to future generations. These were not just bad leaders. They were ruthless tyrants who defied God, oppressed their people, and sealed their own fates in ways more terrifying than you can imagine. From those who sacrificed their own children to false gods, to those who murdered prophets and burned sacred scrolls, each of these kings played a dangerous game and lost. But who was the worst of them all, and what chilling fate awaited them in the end? Stay with me, because by the time we reach the number 1 spot, you'll see just how far a man can fall when he turns his back on God. Here we go. Number 10. King Omri, the evil architect of Israel's downfall. Few kings in the Bible are as quietly destructive as King Omri. Though his name doesn't always stand out like Ahab or Manasseh, his legacy is one of corruption, idolatry, and political manipulation that shaped Israel for generations. Omri didn't just embrace wickedness, he institutionalized it. When he took the throne after a bloody civil war, as 1 Kings 16:21-23, he secured his reign by building Samaria, a stronghold of idolatry that became Israel's capital. But Omri didn't just create a new political center, he established a new spiritual direction, one that rejected God completely. Under his rule, Israel fully turned to Baal worship. He strengthened political ties with pagan nations, paving the way for his son, King Ahab, to marry Jezebel, one of the most infamous figures in biblical history. This alliance with evil led to even greater spiritual corruption in Israel, a darkness that would remain for centuries. The Bible sums up Omri's reign with chilling words. Omri did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and did worse than all who were before him. 1 Kings 16:25. That's right, he was worse than all the previous wicked kings. His legacy wasn't just about his own sins, but about how he set the stage for Israel's ultimate destruction. And how did he die? Unceremoniously. No great battle, no dramatic fall. Just a wicked man passing into history, leaving behind a kingdom doomed to collapse. What do you think? Did Omri's actions make him one of the most dangerous kings in Israel's history? Let me know in the comments of what you think. Number 9. King Hoshea, the last king of Israel. What happens when a nation continuously ignores God's warnings? What happens when king after king leads the people into sin? King Hoshea, the last king of Israel, gives us the tragic answer. His reign marked the final chapter of the northern kingdom, and his decisions sealed Israel's ultimate downfall. Hoshea took the throne after assassinating King Pekah, 2 Kings 15:30. At first, he appeared to be a less evil ruler compared to his predecessors, 2 Kings 17:2. But make no mistake, his actions brought about the end of Israel. Instead of turning back to God, he continued idolatry, leading the nation deeper into spiritual darkness. One of his biggest mistakes was betraying the Assyrian Empire. Hoshea tried to form an alliance with Egypt, thinking he could break free from Assyria's control, 2 Kings 17:4. But this plan backfired. The mighty Assyrian army marched into Israel, laid siege to Samaria, and after 3 years completely conquered the kingdom. The result? The northern kingdom of Israel was wiped off the map. The Israelites were forcibly taken into exile, never to return as a unified nation again. This event, known as the Assyrian captivity, was the fulfillment of God's warnings through the prophets. Because of generations of sin, Israel lost everything. Imagine the weight of being the king who oversaw the complete destruction of his nation. Hoshea's reign wasn't just another bad leadership. It was the end of an entire kingdom. And so, with Hoshea's fall, Israel disappeared from history, a tragic reminder that when a nation rejects God, its downfall is inevitable. What do you think? Could Hoshea have done anything to save Israel, or was it already too late? Let's discuss this in the comments. Number 8. King Ahaziah, the doomed king. Some kings rule for decades, shaping the destiny of a nation. Others barely last long enough to make an impact. King Ahaziah of Israel falls into the latter category, but don't be fooled by his short reign. His reckless leadership, alliance with evil, and ultimate downfall make him one of the most tragic kings in the Bible. Ahaziah, the son of the infamous King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, inherited not just the throne, but also their wickedness. 1 Kings 22:51-53. He continued leading Israel into idolatry and Baal worship, provoking God's anger. Unlike his father, who ruled for years, Ahaziah's time was cut short, and his own decisions sealed his fate. One of his most foolish mistakes was when he fell from the balcony of his palace in Samaria and suffered severe injuries. 2 Kings 1:2. Instead of seeking God for help, he turned to Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron, hoping for a prophecy about his recovery. This act of outright rebellion brought a swift and terrifying response from God. The prophet Elijah confronted Ahaziah's messengers, declaring that because Ahaziah had sought a false god instead of the Lord, he would never rise from his sickbed. He was as good as dead. 2 Kings 1:3-4. Desperate, Ahaziah sent soldiers to arrest Elijah, but fire from heaven consumed them. Not once, but twice, entire groups of men were destroyed by divine fire. 2 Kings 1:9-12. In the end, everything happened exactly as Elijah prophesied. Ahaziah never recovered, and his death marked another dark chapter in Israel's history. His reign may have been short, but it serves as a chilling reminder. Rejecting God and following evil paths leads to swift destruction. What do you think? Did Ahaziah ever have a chance to change, or was he doomed from the start? Let's discuss this in the comments. Number 7. King Zimri, the king who burned himself alive. Some kings ruled for decades, leaving behind legacies of power and influence. Others barely sat on the throne long enough to make an impact. And then there was Zimri, a man whose reign was so short and disastrous that he holds one of the briefest and most tragic kingships in history. Zimri's story is one of betrayal, ambition, and a fiery end. Literally, he was a commander in Israel's army under King Elah, but instead of serving loyally, he had other plans. When he saw an opportunity to seize the throne, he assassinated King Elah while the king was drunk. 1 Kings 16:8-10. Not content with just eliminating Elah, Zimri went further. He slaughtered the entire royal family of Baasha, ensuring there were no rivals left. A brutal start for a man who wanted power. But Zimri's time as king was shorter than a single week, just 7 days. His biggest mistake. He underestimated how much the people hated him. The army, still loyal to Elah's general Omri, refused to accept Zimri as king. Instead, they immediately declared Omri as their new ruler and marched toward the capital to overthrow the traitor. Realizing his fate was sealed, Zimri made a desperate, unthinkable decision. Instead of being captured, he locked himself inside the royal palace and set it on fire. 1 Kings 16:18. He burned to death in the flames, perishing in the very throne room he had so ruthlessly stolen. Zimri's story serves as a chilling lesson. Power gained through treachery never lasts. His ambition, betrayal, and paranoia led to one of the fastest downfalls in biblical history. A king who ruled for only a week before perishing in the flames of his own destruction. What do you think? Was Zimri's fate justified, or could he have found another way out? Let's discuss this in the comments. Number 6. King Elah, the drunken king who never saw it coming. Some kings are known for their wisdom, others for their power, but King Elah, he is remembered for his weakness, indulgence, and downfall, so swift he never even had a chance to react. Elah was the son of King Baasha, who had seized the throne of Israel through bloodshed. But unlike his ruthless father, Elah lacked the strength, discipline, or intelligence to hold on to power. Instead of ruling with wisdom, he gave himself over to drunkenness and pleasure, completely unaware that his own men were plotting against him. His reign lasted only 2 years, 1 Kings 16, 8-10, and in that short time he made one critical mistake. He trusted the wrong people and let his guard down. While he was drinking himself into a stupor at the house of his steward, Arza, his own military commander Zimri, walked in and assassinated him. Imagine the scene, Elah oblivious, laughing over his wine, enjoying his night, when suddenly his trusted officer turns against him. Before he can even react, the blade strikes. In a moment of betrayal, his reign is over. But Zimri didn't stop there. He wiped out Elah's entire family, ensuring there were no heirs left to challenge him. A man who thought he was secure in his luxury was erased from history in a single drunken night. Elah's story is a sobering lesson about leadership. Complacency, indulgence, and carelessness lead to disaster. He had a throne, but he lacked the wisdom and discipline to keep it. Do you think Elah could have ruled differently, or was his fate sealed from the start? Let's discuss this in the comments. Number 5. Nadab, the short-lived legacy of evil. Some kings rule for decades, shaping the destiny of their people. Others barely last long enough to leave a mark. King Nadab, son of Jeroboam, falls into the latter category. His reign was short, but his failure was monumental. Nadab became king of Israel after the death of his father Jeroboam, the man who led Israel into idolatry, 1 Kings 12:26-30. Instead of learning from his father's mistakes and turning the nation back to God, Nadab doubled down on the same sins that had already doomed his family. He continued leading Israel in worshipping the golden calves set up by Jeroboam, ignoring the warnings of the prophets. But Nadab's biggest mistake wasn't just idolatry, it was arrogance. He thought he was untouchable, assuming the throne would remain his, without realizing that his enemies were watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. During a military campaign against the Philistine city of Gibbethon, his own officer Baasha saw an opportunity and seized it. In the middle of war, while Israel's forces were focused on battle, Baasha assassinated Nadab and took the throne for himself. 1 Kings 15:27-28. But Baasha didn't stop with Nadab. He went even further, wiping out Jeroboam's entire family line, just as had been prophesied. 1 Kings 15:29-30. Nadab's reign lasted only 2 years, yet his failure was complete. Instead of being a great leader, he became a cautionary tale, a king who inherited a throne but had no vision, no wisdom, and no future. His story serves as a chilling reminder that power without purpose is meaningless. A leader who ignores God's warnings and repeats past mistakes is doomed to a swift and tragic downfall. What do you think? Could Nadab have done anything differently, or was his fate inevitable? Let's discuss this in the comments. Number 4. King Baasha, the usurper who brought his own doom. Some kings rise to power through inheritance, while others seize it with blood and ambition. Baasha was the latter, a military commander who saw an opportunity to overthrow his king and took it without hesitation. But as history would prove, a throne gained through treachery often comes with a heavy curse. Baasha's story begins during the reign of King Nadab, the son of Jeroboam. Nadab had continued his father's sins, leading Israel into idolatry and rebellion against God. But while Nadab was busy waging war against the Philistines at Gibbethon, Baasha, one of his own military officers, saw his chance. He assassinated Nadab in cold blood and claimed the throne for himself, 1 Kings 15:27-28. But Baasha wasn't satisfied with just taking the throne. He wanted to erase all trace of Jeroboam's lineage to secure his rule. So, in a brutal act of power, he wiped out every single member of Jeroboam's family, fulfilling the prophecy that Jeroboam's descendants would be destroyed. 1 Kings 15:29-30. At first, it seemed that Baasha had done what was necessary. He had eliminated the corrupt dynasty and taken control of Israel. But his own reign would soon mirror the very wickedness he had overthrown. Instead of leading Israel back to God, Baasha fell into the same idolatry, corruption, and disobedience that had doomed Jeroboam. Because of this, the prophet Jehu delivered a chilling prophecy. Baasha's house would suffer the same fate as Jeroboam's, wiped out completely. 1 Kings 16:1-4. Baasha reigned for 24 years, but his legacy was one of failure and hypocrisy. His own son, Elah, would be assassinated just like Nadab, and his dynasty would be erased from history. Baasha's life is a powerful warning. When you gain power through violence and treachery, don't be surprised when the same fate comes for you. Do you think Baasha ever regretted his actions, or was he too blinded by ambition? Let's discuss this in the comments. Number 3, King Belshazzar, the king who saw the writing on the wall. Some kings fall in battle, some are betrayed, and some party their way into destruction. Belshazzar, the last king of Babylon, was the perfect example of arrogance in the face of impending doom. His story is one of pride, blasphemy, and a terrifying message from God that sealed his fate. Belshazzar ruled Babylon during a time of crisis. The mighty empire was crumbling, and the Persian army was at its gates. But instead of preparing for battle or seeking divine guidance, Belshazzar threw a massive feast, one of the most infamous parties in history. This wasn't just a royal banquet, it was an act of blasphemy. In a show of defiance, he ordered that the sacred gold and silver vessels taken from God's temple in Jerusalem be brought in, so he and his guests could drink from them and worship their false gods. Daniel 5:2-4. Then at the height of the celebration, something chilling happened. A mysterious hand appeared and began writing on the wall. The room fell silent as terror gripped the king. None of his wise men could interpret the message, so the prophet Daniel was summoned. Daniel's words were a death sentence. Mene, mene, tekel, upharsin. The message was clear. God had weighed Belshazzar, found him lacking, and declared that his kingdom would be taken away. That very night, while the king feasted, the Persian army entered Babylon. Belshazzar was killed, and the mighty Babylonian empire fell. Daniel 5:30-31. Belshazzar's story is a warning to all who think they are untouchable. His arrogance blinded him to the reality of his kingdom's downfall, and he mocked God until his very last breath. His fate shows that no empire, no power, and no wealth can stand against the judgment of the Almighty. Do you think Belshazzar could have avoided his fate if he had humbled himself? Let's discuss this in the comments. Number 2, King Ahab. If there was ever a king in the Bible who fully embraced evil, it was King Ahab. His reign over Israel was marked by idolatry, corruption, oppression, and outright defiance of God. But what made Ahab so terrible? It wasn't just his own wickedness. It was how he led an entire nation into destruction. Ahab ruled the northern kingdom of Israel for 22 years, 1 Kings 16:29-34. From the moment he took the throne, he made choices that angered God. He married Jezebel, a fanatical worshipper of Baal, and under her influence, he turned Israel away from God completely. He built temples and altars for Baal, introduced pagan priests, and went as far as hunting down and killing the prophets of the Lord. 1 Kings 18:4. But Ahab's evil didn't stop at false worship. He also used his power to oppress the innocent. One of the most infamous stories of his cruelty is found in 1 Kings 21, the story of Naboth's vineyard. Naboth owned a small vineyard near Ahab's palace, and Ahab wanted it for himself. When Naboth refused to sell, Jezebel falsely accused him of blasphemy, had him stoned to death, and Ahab seized the land. This act of greed and murder sealed Ahab's fate. Because of his evil ways, God sent the prophet Elijah to pronounce judgment on him. Dogs will lick your blood where Naboth was killed, and your family will be wiped out. At first, Ahab humbled himself, and God delayed the punishment. But his wickedness continued. He ignored countless warnings, aligned himself with false prophets, and ultimately died in battle, exactly as prophesied. He was shot by an enemy archer, and when his chariot was washed, dogs licked up his blood, just as Elijah had predicted. 1 Kings 22:34-38. Ahab's reign serves as a powerful warning. When leaders reject God and embrace evil, destruction is inevitable. His life shows the dangers of unchecked idolatry, greed, and ignoring divine warnings. What do you think? Was Ahab the worst king in Israel's history? Let's discuss. Imagine a king so wicked that he made the streets run red with innocent blood, a ruler who turned an entire nation against God, defiled the temple, and even sacrificed his own children in fire. His reign was so evil that God himself declared that his sins would bring unavoidable destruction upon his people. And yet, his story doesn't end the way you'd expect. Who was this king? And why does his name still haunt the pages of history? Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will shake you to your core. So, the number one king on this list of wickedness is none other than King Manasseh, the ruler whose sins were so great that they sealed the fate of an entire nation. If there was ever a king whose actions provoked God's wrath like never before, it was King Manasseh. His reign was filled with evil, idolatry, and the shedding of innocent blood. He wasn't just bad, he was the worst king Judah ever had. Manasseh ruled Judah for 55 years, 2 Kings 21:1, making him the longest reigning king in Judah's history. But instead of using that time to lead his people in righteousness, he dragged the entire nation into deep sin. Unlike his father, the righteous King Hezekiah, Manasseh reversed every good thing his father had done. He rebuilt pagan altars, worshipped false gods, and even placed idols inside the very temple of God. 2 Kings 21:3-5. Manasseh sacrificed his own sons in fire, offering them to pagan gods. 2 Kings 21:6. This level of wickedness was unheard of in Judah's history. The streets of Jerusalem ran with innocent blood because of Manasseh's cruelty. 2 Kings 21:16. He also practiced witchcraft, divination, and consulted mediums, all of which God had strictly forbidden. Because of his great evil, God sent prophets to warn him, but Manasseh refused to listen. As a result, God allowed the Assyrians to capture him. They put a hook in his nose, bound him with bronze chains, and dragged him to Babylon in humiliation. 2 Chronicles 33:11. But here's the shocking part. In his suffering, Manasseh repented. He humbled himself before God and prayed for forgiveness. 2 Chronicles 33:12-13. And incredibly, God had mercy on him and restored him to his throne. Manasseh then tried to undo the damage by removing idols and restoring true worship. But the scars of his reign remained. Judah never fully recovered from the sins he introduced. Manasseh's story is both a warning and a message of hope. It shows how sin brings destruction, but God's mercy is always available to those who truly repent. What do you think? Does Manasseh's late repentance redeem his legacy, or was his damage too great? Let's discuss. We have uncovered the darkest reigns in biblical history, kings who defied God, led nations into ruin, and paid the ultimate price. But their stories are more than just history. They are warnings. What can we learn from their downfalls? Could the same patterns of pride, idolatry, and rebellion still be at work today? Now, I want to hear from you. Who do you think was the absolute worst king on this list? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this eye-opening, don't forget to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe for more shocking biblical insights. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a deep dive into the mysteries of the Bible. Until next time, thanks for watching and see you in my next video. Until then, stay blessed.